How are you guys doing? Good morning. Is everybody awake? Is your core engaged? I have 40 minutes, and I've been wanting to do this conference for like 10 years, so I'm coming in hot. Is everybody ready to get weird? Okay, so like Andrew said, I'm a chef and I'm a scientist. What I do, we like to call it culinary science. So what that means is I have been cooking in restaurants since I was 15 in high school, and followed my journey through the science of food and just loving biochemistry to end up getting a PhD in mashed potatoes, which Harold McGee told me to do. And it was a random conversation in the side hallway one day, and then 4 years later I was like, hey, look, I got a paper. So my work is explaining to people how to make stuff tasty and how to do that. So when I started in grad school, actually before I started in grad school, there was like a hot 6 months where I thought I invented the field of food science. I was cooking in restaurants as I was studying biochem as an undergrad, and food science does not have the best PR as a field of science. It is often described as people in white lab coats putting secrets into your food. And I didn't know food science was a thing. I read books like Harold's. I started reading things about the science of food. And as a line cook, I was like, haha, I have the leg up. I found the secret code book. Because when I was trying to navigate my way through making hollandaise under pressure, I had like this cartoon reel of proteins and fats and stuff moving around and colliding. And that really helped me not depend on the phase of the moon or what planet was in retrograde when I was trying to make an emulsion work. And I discovered that food science was in fact a thing through Google. I went to UC Davis and I started doing a PhD in food biochem. Right there, I was an hour away from the French Laundry. I was an hour away from San Francisco and everything cool that was happening there. And at Davis, I was in this epicenter of science and food. And one of the things that was a bit of a moment of disenchantment, I thought that a grad program in food science was going to be a bunch of nerdy cooks. The majority of my classmates were brilliant chemists, microbiologists, engineers who happened to be looking at apple pectin instead of petroleum. A lot of my colleagues did not care about food. They were not interested in food. The stuff that they ate for lunch was kind of incredible. There was something there that was a disconnect, and something that I have spent my career so far trying to do is figure out a way to bridge that gap between the lab and the equations and what is actually happening in your mouth, in your hands, on the stove, and at the table. And so one of the things I want to talk about today is laying a base for everything we're going to get into over the next 2 days in a way that's weaponized. So I was at Davis. I was doing my field of study. I was getting very, very deep into understanding how to make the world's best mashed potatoes. We got from zero to the world's best mashed potatoes in like six weeks. The next 4 years were based on proving beyond a doubt the exact biochemical pathway of how one obtains the world's best mashed potatoes. The potatoes got no better from week 6 to like week 400. So I started at that same time consulting for chefs. So I was teaching at the Culinary Institute of America. I was teaching 18-year-olds in their first semester about how flavor works, how heat transfer works, how texture works. And I was also working with Thomas Keller at the French Laundry. I was working with Daniel Hume at 11 Madison Park. At one point or another, I think my partners and I were working with 75% of the 3 Michelin star restaurants in the country. And the crazy thing was, in a single day, I would go from Davis, where I was unraveling the mysteries of like crispy potatoes, to the CIA, where I was teaching a sweaty 18-year-old how to pass their practical exam and make things crispy. And then I would go just down the road to the French Laundry, and Chef Keller and I would talk about crispiness in fried chicken. And it was all the same. And I wrote a book about that. It's called Ingredient. It's basically laying out the fact that all food is made up of just a couple different things, and those things repeat the same patterns over and over again. I ended up writing an article for the San Francisco Chronicle that was titled, "Crispiness Does Not Care How Many Michelin Stars You Have." If you're eating a bag of chips in the middle of a Walgreens at 2 a.m., you are following the same laws of the universe we inhabit as if you're at Per Se in Columbus Circle. And that is the big theme that I want to talk about. World Umami Forum. Umami is not Japanese. Sorry, President Nishi. It's not Japanese. We need to get past that. It's not even special. It's not mysterious. It's not elusive. It's not magical. Gravity is not British. That's a deep cut Isaac Newton joke for you guys at 10:27. Gravity is not British. Umami is not Japanese. Japan is just the dope studio where Umami dropped its first mixtape. All right? Umami is something that was conceptualized by a lot of Japanese chefs and Japanese food culture. Umami is no more Japanese than it is Nigerian or Mexican or Canadian. And we need to get past that, because that was something that when I first started teaching and working with chefs as a consultant, the two things they told me were, I don't know if I'm super into the science stuff. I'm not trying to make foams and spheres. I'm not into molecular gastronomy, to which my response was, no. The science of fried chicken fried in a 100-year-old cast iron skillet is the same science as something that levitates 6 inches above your plate and reads you your fortune and drains your bank account, right? The other thing people told me was, when I was talking about umami, was, I'm not really into Asian food. Like, come on. we can do better than that. We're going to get into it. So does that sound like a plan if we dig into that a little bit? Yes. Okay, so in that intro, a bunch of the chef judges said they're really excited about flavor. What is flavor? Audience participation? Shout at me. Come on. Huh? Aroma and texture, taste, smell, mouthfeel, all of these things, right? So flavor and taste often get conflated in our language and in a lot of other languages. We're going to get into taste. Taste is one part. There's smell, there's touch, there's hearing. The Coca-Cola company sells sounds. Like, in space, no one can sell you a Coke, you know? And then vision. Obviously, we talk about eating with our eyes first. There's a lot of stuff of digging into the psychology and physiology of flavor that I'm not going to go into depth. And in general, I'm not here to take you into depth. I'm here to give you street fighting understanding, right? I don't want you to have to stop and take 5 minutes to science in the middle of deciding what to order on a menu, or deciding how to cook something, or saving Thanksgiving because your Uncle Larry will not stop opening the oven, or whatever happens to you guys that's not hyper-specific to your childhood scars. Flavor is also filtered through all of our emotional baggage. So your mood, your memories, your attention, your condition, all of that is going to play into how you perceive flavor. But let's jump into where a lot of people associate flavor starting, which is taste. So right now, we're talking about 5 basic tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami. Umami is not special. It is also not Japanese. I'm going to say that 10 more times. There may be more, depending on how deep you dive into literature. But the basic idea is that taste gives us a very rudimentary, fundamental foundation of what's going on with food. If you just look at taste, you're getting a very, very small fraction of the whole story. For you to taste things, in general terms, they have to dissolve in your saliva. Audience participation. What's saliva made out of? Water. Okay? Oil and water do or do not mix. Come on, people. This is all just keeping us awake. This is coffee. Oil and water do not mix. One of the oldest adages in like the chef world, the best cliche you'll ever hear, is fat has flavor. Some chefs get really bold and they say, no, fat is flavor. Oil and water do not mix. For you to taste something, it must dissolve in your saliva. Saliva is mostly water. Therefore, A plus B equals fat cannot be tasted. Again, you dive really deep into literature. There's some maybe potential exceptions. Canola oil, like intact fats, intact triglycerides, there's no registering of taste there. Are all chefs wrong? Nah. They're right about a different thing. Fat does have flavor. There are things going on there, so there must be more to the story. We'll get to that in a second. Real quick, we're probably going to say this like 10 times over the next few days. That tongue map from first grade? Lies. This is the original. I'm not going to. Yeah, it's the original fake news. I spent 2 years from the ages of 6 to 8, just thinking I was hot to trot with my science, licking ice cream cones with just the tip of my tongue because I wanted maximum sweetness, and I was lied to. Taste receptors. More eloquent people than I will talk about those in a minute. Smell. Smell is what's going on with a lot of fats. For you to smell things, just like there's a condition for you to taste something, it has to dissolve in your saliva. For you to smell something, it has to float up into your nose, right? So it has to be volatile. There's a couple of different kinds of smell. There's what are called impact aromas, where just a single molecule can tell you that you're smelling something vanilla-y, which is why you can have imitation vanilla extract that, sure, it lacks all of the amazing dimension and complexity and depth of like a Madagascar vanilla bean, but you at least know what song it's trying to play, right? It's a good cover band. Composite aromas are a little bit more complex. They're an assemblage of different compounds that give you a picture of what's going on. You are very infrequently going to hear Mahler's Fifth Symphony at a karaoke bar. That's what's going on here, right? There's more complexity. These are harder to just fabricate, the overall aroma profile of a strawberry. When you smell stuff, did you guys know that there's 2 ways of smelling? There's 2 types of smelling. There's orthonasal and retronasal olfaction. Those are words we don't need to worry about. There's the front way, and then when I start chewing on this thing, there's the back way, where it goes up the back of my nose. And so this second type of smelling is what confuses a lot of people, where people say, oh, no, the taste of vanilla is all of the vanilla-iness. The taste of vanilla is probably bitter, because it's probably alcohol extract, and alcohol is very bitter. The aroma of vanilla is what we associate with vanilla. If you pinch your nose next time you're having anything with vanilla, really pinch it hard so you have to breathe around your food, you will get nothing of vanilla until you release your nose, exhale through your nose, and all of a sudden somebody turns a spotlight on the vanilla-ness. So the fact that that happens at the same time as taste is super confusing for people. But now you all know, now you're going to be annoying at parties. One of the key things that we're going to talk about, I'm just going to spend like 2 more minutes on how flavor works, and I want to spend the rest of the time talking about how cooking works, how we get to all of these flavor milestones. One of the big themes is that as stuff breaks down, how many of you in here are RDs, nutrition folk? So as all of those macronutrients that we put on a merry-go-round and feel bad about 1 decade at a time, when sugar is done, what are we going to go back next to? Is there ever going to be like a protein backlash where we're like, Dr. Oz said 10 things you don't know about eating 47 grams of protein per hour. So all of those macronutrients, the fundamental building blocks of food, as they break down, as a general rule, they start flinging more stuff at your tongue and your nose. As things break down, all of these different actual physical crumbling of molecules just creates a big grab bag of different things to taste. So you have something as simple as like odorless, I don't know, grapeseed oil, beef tallow, very neutral fat. As that thing breaks down, you're going to get this crazy bouquet of aromas. And we're going to explain how that plays into umami, specifically MSG, in a little bit. When we talk about touch is split into a bunch of different things, where not only do you have texture, but you have all of the tingly, burny, nummy stuff that's from hijacked touch sensors that are cueing you into what are called chemesthetics. You get temperature, and a lot of what people associate in wine with astringency. That's another thing that's not taste. That has a lot more to do with touch. Once you have touch, what happens is all of your senses start to communicate with each other. So I was born in Austin, the land of Tex-Mex and sizzling fajita platters. These guys, like the Coca-Cola company, are selling you sound. Has anybody ever had really good meat in your life? Yeah. Would you say that that meat was cooked perfectly by a chef who then sliced it on a nice bias and put it into a sizzling hot cast iron pan to continue cooking for like 15 minutes while it got to your plate? Is that like the best way to serve meat, whether or not you're a chef? That, in this case, portobello mushroom, is not getting any sexier. Well, it's not getting any more juicy just sitting on that continuing to cooking surface. It is getting sexier. And there is a reason that in Tex-Mex restaurants, people parade the fajita platter. Like, you know, kitchen is here, the diner is there. They'll like take the long way around and they'll say, behold, behold, everyone give notice. It's a viral sensation. There's sound going on there. When you have banana cream pie, this is a classic example. Who in here bakes? Has anybody ever baked with bananas? Do you bake with bright yellow bananas? First of all, are bright yellow bananas ever actually canary yellow on the inside? Cartoons are really screwing with America. How does banana cream pie get that color when you're using like black bananas that on the inside are the color of garden slugs? Yellow food coloring. Let's get real. Yellow food coloring ostensibly has no taste or aroma, but what it's doing is it's cueing our brains in, it's teeing us up to be like, ooh, all right, banana is here. The flavor, what is the flavor of blue raspberry? Blue, delicious, right? Pistachios are super expensive. Industrial ice cream really wants to sell you 50% air or more. Do you think they're putting enough really subtle, perfectly toasted pistachios into that bright green ice cream in order to make it taste like gelato that you get on the Lower East Side? Nah, tastes like green. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not here to cast any aspersions there. This is just the rules that we're playing by. Your tastes, your individual tastes, your perception of aroma, all of these senses can also suppress and enhance each other. And this is one of the first things that when we're going to start talking about umami. Salted caramel. Why is this a thing? Why is this a thing? It's delicious, right? At very low concentrations, salt actually increases our perception of sweetness. In some concentrations as well, salt will suppress our perception of bitterness. It's a very Scandinavian thing to salt your espresso before you pull the shot. Maybe they're roasting their beans wrong. I don't know. The presence of MSG in dishes, it is one of the greatest flavor hype men. It comes out and it's like, are you guys ready for deliciousness? That's kind of what MSG does. We'll get into that in a minute. Pop culture. Another thing that's really important is the presence of the prevalence of tasting menus, of eating little things, of foraging, of all of these things that are very trendy right now, small plates, due in part because your brain is the greatest computing entity that we will probably ever have in our lifetimes on planet Earth. Even your brain has limits. It tunes out that which is constant in order to save more processing space to look at stuff that's changing, things that may be threats or maybe holding the key to our salvation nutritionally. So, for instance, everybody in this room, you can see your own nose. Trust me, Iranian. The reason that you can see your own nose, and it probably just popped into your vision after like at least a couple of years of not thinking about it, the reason you can play tennis is because it's always in the same place relative to your vision. And so you can tune that out. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about your breath. You don't have to think about, well, when you move into a new house, it smells like new house. After a while, it just smells like nothing. Your friends come over and they're like, ooh, smells like very particular. That is adaptation. That is our senses sort of down-tuning when things are consistent, which is one of the reasons why tasting menus are amazing, because you keep shock and awing your senses with different types of stimuli. By the way, Andrew Zimmern is one of probably the only TV personalities who has 100% approval rating among badass chefs. There are people on TV who are maybe less good-willed in their promotion of food around the world. There's a show where a dude eats way too much of different foods for stunt. You guys know what I'm talking about? There was an episode of that show where he was trying to eat like a 6-pound ice cream sundae. Has anybody seen this show? Okay, so if you've seen the show, dude had the room for pounds 5 and 6 of the sundae, but there was some fatigue going on. He was hitting a wall. Does anybody know what this human being on television did in order to finish the 6 pounds of ice cream? Ordered a side of fries. Those fries did not clear out any room. Those fries were, I don't know, as much as there can be an opposite of ice cream, the opposite of cold, sweet, creamy was hot, crunchy, salty. Did a little recalibration, brought him back, plowed through it. Tasting menu, like passed through a funhouse mirror, right? Who's with me so far? Great. Your mood affects how things land with you from a flavor perspective. And this is one of the main reasons I really want to talk about how umami is not Japanese. In this country, we have an obsession a lot of times with pork. I saw somebody with a bacon t-shirt today getting coffee. 1.6 billion Muslims in the world would find that shirt offensive. And like the most amazing heritage, perfect, slow-cooked pork belly would be an incredible taboo on the tables of like a sixth or a fifth of the human population. That could end your business relationship. That could cause trouble in your marriage. What's going on in your life really, really affects how things will happen. This, in the upper right corner, so this is a dish that one of my friends and colleagues, Kyle Connaughton, helped to develop at a restaurant called the Fat Duck. This was a dish called the Sounds of the Sea. Some of you may be very familiar with it, some not. The basic principle is this. So I currently live in San Francisco. Just 30 minutes west of me is the Pacific Ocean. There's a place called Tamales Bay. Yeah, anybody who's ever been there is, yeah. It is one of the best places for oysters in the world because you drive along this winding, really, really beautiful hilly landscape down to the water. You get down there, it smells like coastal eucalyptus, and there's seagulls doing seagull things, and you can just barely hear water lapping onto the shore. And it just smells saline and beautiful, even though you can't smell salt. That's an association. We can get into that another day. And you go up to this little stand, and there's a tank with oysters in cold water in little mesh bags and picnic tables. And you order 20 oysters, they pull it out of the water, and it's this like pornographic moment of just like shah, and there's like water cascading off of it. You go have those oysters. Those are the best oysters you'll ever have. That place is open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So you could show up there at 1 p.m., and you can have really amazing oysters in the afternoon, and seagulls can fight you for them, and you can really be in the terroir of the moment. You could also show up right when they open at 10 a.m. You could get those you could take the whole tank, you could put it on the back of a flatbed truck, and you could drive it 3 hours inland to a used Honda dealership in Stockton, California, where it's 110 degrees and it smells like petroleum. And you could sit in the cab of that flatbed truck and consume those same oysters at arguably the exact same state of freshness. Will you have a different experience? Your mood matters. And so at the Fat Duck, at that time it was the #1 restaurant in the world, this crazy 3 Michelin star restaurant. You were going there, you were about to fork over 300 pounds for dinner. You maybe didn't know how to act. You were wearing an uncomfortable tie or dress. And you sat down, you're in the middle of this dinner. And then all of a sudden, this seafood course comes out. It's oysters and sea foam and some brioche made to look like bread, look like sand. And a conch shell with an iPod Nano in it. It was like 2006, iPod Nano. You put those earbuds in, and all of a sudden, you've got the sounds of the sea. And people wept. I'm not kidding. I mean, it's like an emotionally charged moment. All of a sudden, people were taken back to family vacations by the seashore. People were all of a sudden transported and shut out from other things that were going on. It was one of the most powerful experiences in kind of like, I don't know, micro-marketing that you could ever do. Setting that table for people, changing their perception with emotion is crazy powerful. So it's a great story. Getting away from that, how do we get flavor to happen? This is what I want to spend the rest of the time talking about. So tell me if anybody disagrees. When we are talking about recipes, when all of you dietitians and nutritionists are recommending how people should eat things or prepare things to live their healthiest lives, we're talking about generally like how you brulee, how you roast the onion, what you're going to do to the collard greens, how you're going to make the blueberry sauce, right? You're talking about what you're going to do to those ingredients, correct? The crux of everything that my partners and I, we have a consulting company. We work with everybody from the biggest food companies in the world, 2-3 Michelin star chefs, to people doing a food startup looking at cold brew coffee in their garage. All of these people, the thing that we tell them is that the key drivers behind this and literally everything that you will ever cook, eat, serve, write about, or recommend to your clients ever again is made up of these, which in a moment of being drunk with power, we called the capital I ingredients, like some kind of crazy pantheon of deities. Do these look familiar? Yes? Water, sugars, complex carbs. The reason, yes, sugars are carbs. The reason that I separate sugars from complex carbs is because carbs behave in almost no ways like sugar in the pan. When it comes to making food tasty, they really have different skill sets. And then you've got lipids, proteins, minerals, gases, and heat. So these things come together, and one of the main things that I want to instill with everybody today, and in general that we do in our consulting work, when we write about food, is that these do not have to be complicated. They do have to be complicated for the fundamentals of food science, but for culinary science, for explaining to people how all of this stuff works, for really getting at how MSG fits into the big picture, we just need to characterize them like characters in a story. I don't think we need to say the word science that often when we're talking about how food works, how cooking works. And so for me, rather than looking at sugars and thinking about that same pathway of glucose metabolism that I was forced to memorize 8 different times in 8 different chemistry classes from middle school through my PhD, I don't think about that anymore. I think about what sugar is doing in almost a gut instinct way. And so what I mean by that is if we characterize them, if we dive into what water actually does in your food, this is it. These are the only tricks that water can play in your food, for good or for bad, for anything. So water will affect what kind of microbes can grow on it. Water affects how things flow. Here's a great example. Who in here did go to culinary school for more than 24 hours? I did not go to culinary school. How long did you guys spend on sauces? Mother sauces, coulis, like Asian sauces, whatever that means? A lot, like months, right? Here is the entire curriculum of all sauces ever made by humans on planet Earth in 30 seconds or less. Pure water is the thinnest liquid that we're going to be working with in the kitchen that won't kill you. The reason that pure water is so very un-nappe is that water, if you zoom in, is kind of like a ball bearing. It can roll around really easily. So when it's rolling around in a cup or in your mouth or like that, there's nothing in its way. The science, the how it works of every sauce, and by sauce I mean hollandaise, I mean gravy, I mean shoyu, I mean wine. Any liquid, the way you make it thicker is if water is going from A to B, pure water has a clear path. Sauce is the act of putting shit, technical term, in water's way, so that it has to take a winding path from A to B, and that takes longer and it gets thicker. You can either put stuff in water's way, you can remove water from a collection where there's already some stuff, thereby concentrating said stuff, or you can lower the temperature, make everything move a little slower. That unifies the most expensive sauce in the world from the nacho cheese dip that you get at a Yankees game. And that is the kind of thing that I want to start just indoctrinating everybody into, that MSG is not this Franken thing cooked up by Frito-Lay to put onto Doritos. MSG is just one of these fundamental realities of the world that we live in when we talk about edible food. So, sauces. You all now went to culinary school. Sugars do a subset of things. Just real quick anecdote. One of the reasons why we're in trouble again with people being freaked out by artificial sweeteners, or now what are called, I just call non-nutritive sweeteners, because it comes from a leaf. It's great. It's natural. Sugar, if all sugar did was sweetness, we would have sugar-free creme brulee like that, and it would be delightful. Sweetness is not the only thing that sugar does. So when you remove sweetness, let's say you remove sweetness from creme brulee, or you remove sweetness from sorbet. Who in here is a fan of Halo Top ice cream? A lot of people are. It's okay. The premise there is you pull out sugar. The premise with anything that's low sugar is you pull out sugar and you replace it with something that tries to mimic sugar. We have varying degrees of success of doing that on the purpose of mimicking sweetness, which is not just is it sweet or not, it's the character of what kind of sweet it is, how long it builds, how long it tapers away. All of that stuff plays into mimicking sweetness. But you pull that out, and all of a sudden, remember I said you put anything in water's way, it's going to make it thicker? You pull sugar out, and all of a sudden things are less tacky and sticky and syrupy. You pull sugar out, and all of a sudden there's less there to bind water and babysit it. So it's really hard to make preserves, strawberry preserves, without sugar that are still preserved. That's why they call them freezer jams, because you don't have anything to bogart water and prevent microbes from consuming it. The same thing, if you don't have a babysitter for water and you don't have as much sugar, your ice cream is going to be very icy, right? One of the best tips for how to enjoy low sugar ice cream is to leave it out on the counter until it's almost soup. I saw somebody just go, yes, I live this truth. These fundamental building blocks, they just can't be pulled out of food whole hog. You know, they are going to leave behind a bunch of collateral damage of things that you're not getting. Do you guys remember the 90s? All of you nutritionists in here, you guys did us dirty in the 90s. Food scientists, you as well. So was anybody in here on the original exploratory team that tried to make fat-free cream cheese? You were? For real? Oh my God, this has never happened. In what capacity? What part of the system did you, so she worked at Kraft, she was in R&D. What part of the system did you look at? Were you looking at aroma, texture? Amazing. Pilot plant runs where we're going to try to pull out the fat. This is going to be like Vegas mentalism, if it hasn't already been. So, all right. The point of fat-free cream cheese is you pull the fat out because fat was going to kill us all in the 90s. You pull it out, and the first word in the phrase cream cheese is cream, creamy. So I think the big preoccupation at the entities that were unnamed but were attempting to make fat-free cream cheese were really trying to mimic this, right? You take stuff out of water's way, and then you need to find out some other way to mimic it. So what went there instead of fat? Not sugar. Gums. Carbohydrates, big, long, branchy things that get in water's way really well, which is why they create gels. So the royal we used gums, proteins, a lot of micro particulated whey protein, things that were ground down and just, there was an incredible gold rush to find something that would make something creamy. I have this to say. This is my hot take for the day. You guys succeeded at just this. Fat-free cream cheese, if you pinch your nose, it feels luxurious. It feels decadent. It's got carrageenan. Run for the exit. It feels luxurious. The second you let go, you realize that they forgot about this. Lipids are an incredible cargo ship for storing aroma. The thing before, fat has flavor. Fat is a great, comfy resting place for aroma. And without that, you ended up with cream cheese that felt very creamy, but had all of the aromatic complexity of this stage. Right? I swear this has to do with MSG. We're building to a point here. Heat, the only two things that heat does is it makes things move around and makes things vibrate faster. Those vibrations, those shimmies, those interpretive dances is how reactions happen. And so once you understand, do you guys get a sense now of like, you don't have to be a biochemist to understand the general patterns at play here? That this stuff is going on, that you can use these to take control of your food or your loved one's food or the food that you are bringing into your own body. I like to complement these with real-life examples. So you take a single principle, like proteins. There are some proteins that wake up as microscopic mini machines that build stuff up and break stuff down. Those are enzymes. So those are enzymes. They do a lot of things in our food. Enzymes are not just the things that raw food crazies say will break down arbitrarily at 109 degrees Fahrenheit and then no longer will do celery things for your gut when you eat them cooked. Enzymes are what make cheese ripen. They are what cause tea leaves to brown. They are what make it so that, again, culinary school, one of the, if you ever corner a pastry chef and you make them nervous, the thing that they'll say is, you can't make Jell-O with pineapples. There's an enzyme that digests proteins. There are protein digesting enzymes in pineapples and in papaya, which is why it makes it really hard to make gels with those juices with gelatin, which is a protein. That same principle is going to come into how we find MSG in a lot of our foods. Sugars bind water. It's a fundamental principle of sugar. So preserves are preserved because of sugar. Candied bacon has a different texture because of sugar. A molasses cookie remains ooey gooey moist because of sugar. And that thing that comes out every Thanksgiving where it's like you should brine your turkey or chicken, you know that thing where food writers are like, I'm out of ideas. I'm just going to write this article again. You should brine your chicken or your turkey because you have you have sugar and salt on the inside, bear hugging water as your Uncle Larry continues to open the oven so that you have some insurance policy. So minerals help to unify structures, which controls everything from tofu to Velveeta to canned tomatoes to fresh asparagus. These things just pinball and they echo around everywhere. And the idea is, once we've understood all of this, we can come to this moment of clarity where we just, has anybody seen The Matrix? You know at the end where Keanu Reeves can see all the code? By the end of thinking this way about food, you can see all of the code, and it's the coolest superpower ever. You have culinary X-ray vision. And so if you say, I really want something to turn brown, I want my granola to be golden brown, I want my roast chicken to be golden brown, I want my asparagus to be beautiful and blistered, you are going to be depending on sugars and proteins. If you remove water, that's going to help your cause. If you want something to be aromatic or store aroma, fat and protein are likely the best places they're going to land. If you want something to be crispy, you add sugar, proteins, or carbs, and remove water and heat. Doesn't matter how many Michelin stars you have. If you want something to be juicy, you obviously need water, and you can babysit it with sugar and minerals. If you want something to be savory, you need some protein. There's one way around that, but we'll talk about it in a second. When we talk about savoriness, when we talk about umami, this word that, frankly, I wish we had a non-Japanese word for it. I try to say, and it is just so that people understand that it is for all of us. When we talk about savoriness, when we talk about MSG, so sodium and glutamate, so glutamic acid, these proteins are just, it's a chain of amino acids. One of the links in that chain can be glutamic acid. If there's that glutamic acid that is in solution and there's some sodium anywhere nearby, you have monosodium glutamate. The two ways to get there are to break down protein. You find intact proteins with some of these links in the chain present, break them apart and unleash them on the world, which is what happens in like aged foods. Cheese, miso, dry-aged steak. You're breaking down proteins. It's really hard. Remember when I said you break things apart, you toss these fragments out into the world? When you toss those fragments out into the world, you're able to perceive them. They're able to bind to taste receptors. They're able to float up into your nose. When you break proteins down, you unleash a lot of MSG, if there's any sodium around, which there always is. Another way to do this, you don't have to always start from protein. You can do it through fermentation. So do you guys remember when I was throwing sugar up, there was sugar being consumed by a weird blobby thing, and it was fermented? You can have bacteria, yeast, and mold, just like they're breaking down sugar and turning it into ethanol, or they're turning it into eventually acetic acid in vinegar, or they're turning into lactic acid in dairy and kimchi and charcuterie. Through fermentation, you can create glutamate. This little guy is a letter in the alphabet. It's a letter in the protein alphabet. To be terrified of monosodium glutamate is like the FCC trying to ban the letter F. Do you know what I mean? It's nonsensical. It is a fundamental thing that is in probably every living cell of everything on the planet Earth. And then in things like tomatoes, it accumulates to delicious levels naturally. In things that are then aged and cured, it accumulates even more. A sun-dried tomato is a more powerful force for bringing umami to the American people than shoyu ever will be. And one of the cool things that's happening with chefs around the world now is that we're starting to unlock these pathways. You all are familiar with the Momofuku empire that's here. One of my colleagues, Dan Felder, spent a lot of time with Dave Chang and with the Momofuku chefs making miso out of like pistachios and chickpeas. Taking the process of using enzymes to break down protein to release MSG, well, to release glutamic acid and then there's sodium around, was a way of democratizing umami, which didn't need to happen. Humans didn't have any say in that. It was already democratized. But it was a way of saying, all right, you want to make an Italian miso? We can do it with scarlet runner beans and farro. You don't have to do it with rice and soybeans. This stuff can come from anywhere. It can come from Parma ham as well as it can come from anything in East Asia. And if there's anything that I want to leave you guys with, it's that over the course of the next few days, when we try to grandstand and say that umami is the most important taste, that umami was born in the cradle of Japanese innovation, and umami is this super different secret ingredient, it's not. It is completely commonplace. It is just unremarkable in every way. It's just part of this system that controls all food that you're ever going to eat. So that hopefully, when you look at an egg or a walnut or a tomato, you're not going to think French, Georgia, and Italy. You're going to look at ingredients and think not what ingredients can do for you, but what capital I ingredients are behind the scenes. There's only 8 of them. They repeat over and over and over again. And so when we're talking about MSG, the most important thing that you can remember is that it's in everything, and there's no way you can change that. So we might as well just start enjoying it and learning to use it better in our cooking. Thank you.